Hey guys, my name is Naomi, also known as One Authentic Heart, blogging and vlogging at www.oneauthenticheart.com. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's video. So today I want to talk a little bit about timing, about God's timing, and about the fact that if God has promised something, if God's timing and God's hand is on something and in something in our lives, then there is no man and there is no human cause that will prevent that thing from coming to pass, that will prevent that thing from happening. I was really encouraged by a piece of scripture that I read yesterday, and I decided that that's what I wanted to make a video on for my most recent video. So this is the scripture. Just to give a bit of context, we're in John chapter 8, and Jesus is making some very, very bold claims and some big statements. He is saying that he is the light of the world. He says things like, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. That's John chapter 8, verse 12. The Pharisees are not too happy with it. Continues going along. He says things like in verse 18, I am the one who bears witness about myself, and the Father who sent me bears witness about me. And they said, where is your Father? Jesus said, you don't know me or my Father, because if you knew me, if you knew me, you'd know my Father. Essentially saying you don't have any part in me, you're not an actual believer, because you wouldn't be asking those questions if you knew the truth. And so these things are quite confusing and perplexing, especially to those that are not believers, to those that do not have any faith in the God who's standing in front of them, who do not have any faith in believing that Jesus is in fact who he says that he is. And what I found to be interesting, and why this video is based on timing, is what comes shortly after these claims are being made. Verse 20 of John chapter 8 says, these words he spoke in the treasury as he taught in the temple, but no one arrested him because his hour had not yet come. And I just think that is so powerful. No one arrested him because his hour had not yet come. We know that actually they arrested him later in the Garden of Gethsemane because that was his time. But that was a point where he was doing something far less offensive. He was praying. He was simply praying and saying, Jesus, not my will, but yours be done. But if you can, if there's any other way, take this cup from me. That's far less offensive than standing in front of religious leaders and saying, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. To say those things sounds almost blasphemous to someone who doesn't actually know that who they're speaking to is God himself in human flesh and human form. And so it sounds quite arrogant. And that's the Pharisees were shocked. Isn't this, the carpenter's son? Haven't we known him growing up? Don't we know his parents? Who's this guy now saying that he is the light of the world? But yet they don't arrest him then because it's God's hand and God's ultimate authority that says, now is the time. Now is the time. And that time was Gethsemane. That time was not now. Here, in the midst of all of these Pharisees and all of these leaders that could have arrested him, they didn't, because it wasn't his time. Because the power that the men had, the power and authority that all of the men had combined was not more powerful than the divine promise that God the Father had for his Son. God the Father had for his Son that there would be a certain set time when he was arrested and he was led essentially to his death, only then to rise again 3 days later and to save us and redeem us. And so what I just find amazing and what we can take encouragement from is that if we are standing in the midst of something and we're thinking to ourselves, how do we get out of this? What happens here? What happens next? What's going on? Or if in the midst of a difficult situation where we're saying, I don't know what's about to happen. I feel like someone is going to do something against me if something doesn't change. I feel like this is going to happen. I feel like this is going to happen. And feeling anxious and worried about those things. If we believe in God like we say we do, if we believe and have faith in the God that we profess to worship, then the things that will happen will only happen within God's timing. There is nothing that man can do to us that God has not already preordained to happen. If God is for us, the word says, then who can be against us? Nothing can stand against the promises of God. So if we're worrying, perhaps irrationally, and perhaps even rationally, we then convert that worry. We're not anxious about anything, but instead by prayer and petition, we present our request to God, as it says in Philippians. And we just take joy in the fact that, like Jesus did in the midst of all of this adversity, if it's our hour, then it's our hour, and God knows that, and there'll be whatever we need for that time. If something excruciatingly painful or difficult has to happen, God will give us what we need to bear with that at that time, because we are promised that there will be trouble in this world, but we also are promised that He has overcome the world. But if it's not our hour in the midst of this trial and adversity, if it's not the time when something that we feel is about to come to a head, if it's not the time that it should come to a head, then it won't. No matter how many people on every side want it to happen, it will only happen if God has ordained it to happen. Because God, if He is for us, then who can be against us? He is our authority. He is our strength. He is who we stand on. And therefore, nothing that is against His purposes and plans for our life can or will come against us, because it does not have the power to. I hope that encourages somebody today, because it encouraged me when I read that. That's John chapter 8, verse 20, and then you can read around the text for the context. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do subscribe to my channel and continue to tune in on Facebook, on Tumblr, on Twitter, on Instagram, and all over the place. And essentially all of those things are under one roof at www.oneauthenticheart.com. Thank you so much for tuning in today, guys. God bless.